there's more information that we can find out about the Shabaka Stone. There's some more things that we can talk about. And so I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. And as we do that, as we dig deeper, it gives us a chance to look at some of the timeline with respect to this, as well as some of the historical information behind it and the setting around the Shabaka Stone, and to really take apart a little bit some of the things that it says. And I know we've been talking about that for a little while, but the idea of being able to do it over several sessions, to kind of do it justice and give us a chance to ask questions, to give you a chance to kind of get some feel is what we really want to do. And I want to say up front, for those of you who subscribe to me, if you subscribe to me on Facebook or on YouTube, if you're a subscriber to me, paid subscribers, I have the resource that we're going to talk about today is available. So it's available in my Facebook group. If you're a subscriber, it's only $2.99 a month. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for those. Thank you for all those who are liking the resources, like in the stories, like in the reels. Thank you so much, like in the shorts. You are, a lot of folks, over 100,000 people are following us now. I want to thank you so much for liking the stories, like in the reels. I want to thank you for sharing this information. Thank you for sharing this information, for telling people about it, and for those who support, for those who've bought books, I appreciate it. For those of you who are subscribers on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you may be a subscriber, I really much appreciate it, and thank you so much. And this resource that we're going to talk about today is available on my subscriber page. As I just mentioned, it's available on the subscriber page for Facebook, so I appreciate it very much. It's only $2.99 a month, so you get some resources you can read, not just talking, but some reading as well. So I appreciate any support that you can give. So as we talk about this, as I mentioned, it's available to subscribers. I wanted to kind of jump back into the Shabaka Stone because I think it's a significant document. I think that is something that as we talk about the Shabaka Stone and we talk about the history of the Memphite theology and the idea of whether it's monotheism, polytheism, or ideas of sublime reasoning and ideas of insight, we just skip over Kemetic people a lot, even though there's so much information there, even though there's so many deep things that are there. We really don't even mention them and talk about them. And as you go back and read some of these things, I've been reading about the Shabaka Stone. I've been reading, some of the first people to translate it. I read their articles and read what they wrote about it. And some of the people who were part of the people who initially discovered it and put it in museums and things like that. They did a lot of write-ups. And, a lot of it's racist. A lot of times you'll see them say things about Egyptian people. I mean, Egyptian artifacts and Egyptian information from tombs and various things are in places all over the world. I mean, I don't know that there is a ancient society that has more resources, more artifacts that are in more museums around the world than ancient Egypt. And it's filled. I mean, a lot of people have thousands, tens of thousands of pieces of resources and pieces of artifacts that we know a lot about what they said, what they looked like, what they thought about. And, when you read about it, in particular, people who first started to do this when Egyptology became a thing in 1800s, they say very, very dismissive things. They'll talk about, one group of people in one part of the world, maybe from Europe, being philosophical, and those people being someone who people who were deep thinkers and talked about rational things, and they just completely skip ancient Kemetic thought and say, well, we don't think that they were actually thinking like that, even though we say that they are, even though we're looking at their stuff, even though that we are following a lot of what they did in many, many ways. We don't want to say that they were philosophical thinkers. So it becomes like a significant thing that we think about, that it's up to us to kind of blow the horn. It's up to us to get that out there. It's up to us to talk about this and to put that information out there and to tell people about it. So, I want to kind of blow the horn, and I pray that you will help me and help share this information, and let's talk about it, because as I think about it, I think about sublime thinking. I was doing an article and a video a little earlier around just the calendar, ancient Kemetic calendar. And when you look at the ancient Kemetic calendar, the calendar the ancient Kemetic people created was the first calendar in the world to use 365 days. As far as we know, it's the first calendar in the world to use 365 days. And when we think about that, obviously that's really close to what we're using now. There weren't very many people at that stage, at that time, 5,000 years ago, more than 5,000 years ago, who were using calendars that were 365 days. And so even though we're pretty much using a calendar, we talk about we use the Julian calendar from Julius Caesar, which was based off of the Kemetic calendar, and then the Julian calendar became the Gregorian calendar, which didn't make as much sense. We're essentially using a Kemetic foundation for our calendar. Well, we just don't say it. When we think about the alphabet, we think about Sumerian contributions with the alphabet, or we think about so many different things that came from ancient Kemet and from other places around the world. We just forget about it. We just skip over it. Another thing that I was reading, we'll do some talking about this, is around medicine in ancient Kemet. And, a lot of times we talk about rational thinking. We talk about, the father of medicine being from someplace in the world, no diss to him, being from someplace in the world in Europe. But you have medical papyrus and papyri that are very, very different medical documents in ancient Kemet that talk about ways to approach healing people. Now, stop and think for a minute. When you think about just medicine and treating people, because they say that, medicine, and the reason why it was so significant in Europe and in Greece was because it was a rational way of thinking it. But that wasn't the first time. And it's okay that they did it in Greece. It just wasn't the first time. And so when you think about the medical papyrus that are available, and as well as some of the documents available with respect to ancient Kemet, we know that they had very, very logical and spiritual approaches to healing people. So just imagine if you're building huge pyramids, if you are building massive things like this particular stone carving right here, which was done maybe around 690 BC. It was done a little bit after the time of the Shabaka Stone, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this beautiful carving, and you do these huge, massive stones, whether it's in a temple or it's in a colossal statue, or it's in a pyramid, or it's in someone's home, or some other type of monument that you're doing. People get hurt. Think about it. One of the things you're going to have a lot is broken bones. I mean, we don't think about that, and we don't talk about the very real things that everyday people went through, just like we go through the day. If you're lifting heavy things, or you're working with heavy things, or you're chiseling, you're going to have accidents. You're going to have people get hurt. And so you can find medical documents in ancient Kemet that talk about how do you treat someone if they have an injury to their spine, a certain part of their spine. How do you treat them if there's an injury in the neck or the lower back, or if it's an injury to the arm? How do you set it? I mean, there's very specific documents that were found, and we don't even know if these are the things that were found, what was not found, right? One of them is the Edwin Smith papyrus that talks about medical treatment and approaching in a very logical way, in a very appropriate manner. How do you handle people who get major injuries and breaking bones and the things that you would get from handling very heavy pieces of material is one of the things they had to deal with, along with many other things. So I'm sharing that, from medicine to the calendar to, how we write to things, even our concept of religion. A lot of things happened in other parts of the world that we just don't talk about. Ancient Kemet, Sumeria, various places around the world, things happen that we just don't talk about. And the Shabaka Stone is one of them. And so, and as I mentioned, this gentleman right here, this particular beautiful statue was made around 690 BC or a little bit thereafter. And the Shabaka Stone was written maybe a couple decades before this statue was probably made. So as we jump into it and think about it, we're talking about an idea where you have additional things that people are talking about and that they're thinking about that have to do with really specific things, really things that make you think about sublime ways, things that make you meditate, things that make you do more than just think about things from a superstitious standpoint. And people know it, so it's time for us to just be honest about it. Anybody you look at, if you go to anybody's house, let's say to anybody's dinner table, and you find them put a whole bunch of things out on the table, and maybe it's a place that or some place you've never been before, you're going to find some things that you want to eat, and there may be some things you don't want to eat, maybe some things that don't agree with you. You're going to find that if you go to somebody else's house for dinner. And when you think about that, going back in time, going back to ancient people's lives and what they say and the things they thought about, there are going to be some things you like and some things you don't like. And that's okay. That's appropriate. We're not going to follow everything. We're not going to live 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. We're not going to be someone in another part of the world, in another time, in another space. But we are going to be able to look at people and respect what they brought and understand that everybody brought something to the table. Every part of humanity brought something to the table. And it's time for us to stop looking at Egyptian people and Kemetic people as if they were just superstitious. On the one hand, we want to claim what they did, and we want to be really, happy about it and say this is remarkable and put it all over the museums. And on the other hand, we want to say it's primitive. I mean, this is what I'm reading. This is what people say. And it has a lot to do around color and race. We know that. But it's time for us, even as a people, to look at it and look at our history, to claim our history, and to respect everybody. I'm reading things with respect to Olmec people and people from all over the world. We should respect everybody and talk about everybody's contributions. The world that we have today, the things that we know it because of many people. We want to think about it. We always want to point to one person. We'll come with a scientific creation or endeavor and say, it was that person's idea, or we put that person's name on it. But that person had a whole host of people that fed into them, a whole host of people that they studied, a whole host of people that poured into them, and it probably sometimes wasn't even them, but we just assigned it to one person. It's time for us to kind of remove history like that and start looking at everybody's contributions. And Kemet is one of the places like that, and the Shabaka Stone is an area we can do that now. And I'll mention up here, because this resource, as I mentioned in my subscribers, if you subscribe to me, one of the paid subscribers is $2.99 a month. You have this resource, just download it, you can read it. It talks a little bit about the Shabaka Stone. You can see up here, we're talking about the Shabaka Stone was written in about 716 BC. So, that's a timeline that we can kind of take a look at. And I'll kind of put this up on the screen so we can see it. It's a timeline that we can look at, 716 BC. And that's relatively late in Kemet's history, if you will. So if you take a look at over here, where dynasties 1 and 2 start around 3100 BC, and the Old Kingdom around 2649 BC, give or take some time. You end up having the Middle Kingdom and then the New Kingdom. And then you have the late period. And the late period is the time, the period where ancient Kush took over all of Kemet. So as we think about just Kush and Kemet, it's very important for us to know, as I kind of put this up here, that Kush and Kemet, they developed at the same time. It was not like, Kemet was ruling this whole area up and down the entire Nile Valley for 3,000 years. It wasn't the case. Kush and Kemet were working together and were basically ruling things at the same time. It wasn't simply just Kemet ruling things. So you find that there was trade, there was interaction going on at 3100 BC that was already taking place up and down the Nile Valley, even long before that, way before that, because, people are up and down this tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, and our ancestors, millions of years in this part of the world. People are up and down this area. So it's not new, but since we're dealing with the amount of history that we can tell and we can see in stone and that type of thing, and we're talking about ancient Kemet, we're talking about this time period here. And so I want to make it clear that ancient Kemet and ancient Kush were developing, and there were times when certainly ancient Kemet took over Kush. They took over parts of Lower Nubia, and they didn't have Upper Nubia. They took over parts of Upper Nubia and had the whole thing for a period of time. So there was ebb and flow, but it was certainly not a situation where they controlled all of Nubia for 3,000 years. But during the period of time when we get to the late period, around 743 BC, you find that people in Kush and Upper Nubia, which you can look right there and see in Upper Nubia, they were already a dynasty. They were already, prepared. They had a very long history, as I mentioned. They were at this point in time, they had gotten out of the throes and out of the control of the New Kingdom from ancient Kemet, and they were a powerful dynasty. And there were some people up north in Lower Kemet that were considering coming down to Upper Kemet and taking it over. And around 743 BC, the dynasty that was in Napata, that was part of Kush, it was the Kashta was the ruler. The man's name was Kashta. He was already in control and had power in Upper Kemet, in the southern part of Kemet. So when his son Pianki got a message from people in Upper Kemet, they basically said to him, hey, basically you're the king. We respect you. You have power. You know our traditions. You know our resources. We believe in you. We want you to know that there's some people from up north here. They're threatening. They're coming down. They're marching down farther south, and they want to take over Upper Kemet. They want to take over Waset, this beautiful area that is Waset, where the temple of Karnak was, and the temple of Luxor, and those types of things. They want to take this over, and we're asking you to come protect your kingdom. This literally is what happened, and we'll talk more about that. I've talked about that before. We'll talk more about King Pianki and his whole quest, his conquest. It's a beautiful document. It's amazing what they talked about. And so he talks about how they came and asked him to come protect them. And when King Pianki came, he said, okay, he wasn't rushing. Apparently, he was allowing our men to live in his life. That's what his testimony is. When he came into Upper Kemet from Nubia, right? So he's coming from Nubia. And he comes into Upper Kemet and through Lower Nubia, because Kush is controlling all of that. Kush is controlling all of it at this time during 750 or so, 743 BC. He comes through Lower Nubia, goes into Upper Kemet. He does a festival for our men in honor of our men, and then he marches north. He marches north, and he ends up taking over town after town, city after city. Most of them gave up because they didn't want to fight him. Those that didn't give up were conquered. And you end up having him uniting and conquering everything from low Upper Nubia here all the way up. So you get to the Mediterranean Sea, all the way up to the Delta, to the Nile Delta. And this is how he is the person who helped to unite all of Kemet, not just Upper Kemet, but all of Kemet. But it's important to know that before him, his dad was also controlling Upper Kemet. So once he got everything unified and, he passed away, his family was still in power. We have members of his family who were part of the God's wife of Amen, who were the main priestesses at the temple of Karnak. And we have another relative, Shabaka, on the Shabaka Stone, who is somebody who is, and this is made during the time, who is becoming king. And so Shabaka is a relative of Pianki. He's a part of that Kushite dynasty that takes over all of Kemet, and he is somebody who is to be a force to be reckoned with. So as we start to think about that, and we start to think about the Shabaka Stone, that's kind of the history behind it. You have King Shabaka beginning to coalesce in his strategy. His family members have already taken over Kush. His family members and his dad have already taken over Kush. He's going to have some time after so he's kind of right in the middle there where he's controlling things. And he begins to reach out and do additional things with people who are farther north, people who are up in the lower part of Kemet. He begins to do things with them and to reach out to them. And a part of what his reaching out, they believe, is the Shabaka Stone. And he orders. So the story on the stone, if you actually get a chance to read the stone, you can look it up. You can Google it. You can see pictures of the stone. They have it. It's in the British Museum. They have it. It's a huge granite stone that's beautiful. And there's a lot of writing, a lot of hieroglyphic on it. And the story on the stone says that it was a copy of an older document that was found, that King Shabaka found. And when he found this document, it was worm eaten. So it was obviously on some type of papyrus or something like that. It was worm eaten and it was very much decayed. And it had special things that were on this document. And he wanted to recreate this better than it was before. So he recreates this theology, but he also adds its own to it. So we do not know, scientists do not know what the entire Memphite theology is. They aren't 100% sure. Was this an old theology that he was really repeating? Was it something that he added to it? Because this is the only surviving copy of it. This Memphite theology, Shabaka Stone, is the only surviving copy of it. So in this, he talks about some remarkable things. In this, he talks about Haru versus Set, but he really starts to talk about Ptah. And Ptah is one of the aspects of the creator God, of the creator deity, that when God as Netter, when God as the primeval abyss, if you will, when God as being in no form and no shape decided to, in his heart, to make things, decided to become conscious, decided to kind of come out of himself. He came out of himself as Ptah. That was the creator God. And at this time, the Kemetic people and people all up and down the Nile Valley had an idea of different deities that they might want to put in that creator position, if you will. But they didn't seem to want to fight each other. They didn't seem to want to kill each other. They seemed to be able to find commonality and grounds and ways to work together, even though they may have had different names for what they call the creator of everything, because everybody wanted, their deity to be the creator of everything. But Shabaka says that Ptah is that which brought the lesser deities, the lesser gods, the other gods into being. Ptah brought all the forces that will govern the universe, govern our world, govern our lives, govern our bodies, govern everything. Ptah brought them all into being. And how did Ptah do it? So he's the father of Atum. He's the mother of Atum. How did Ptah do it? Ptah established in his heart first. So Ptah was great. He had a great will. And whatever he put in his heart, he then named with his tongue. So whatever his tongue pronounced was already in his heart. He created the names for everything, the sounds, if you will, for everything. So when they talk about tongue and they talk about heart, they're clearly talking about your will, your idea, and speaking and the substance of your mouth, the ability to bring things out. So it may not have necessarily been a word. Maybe it was a word of power. Maybe it was some type of sound. But Ptah brought things into being with his mouth after establishing it in his heart. And it goes on to say that everything took shape on the tongue of Ptah. That which was in his heart took shape on his tongue. And what he began to give life to all things. He gave life to the lesser gods and to their souls, if you will, and to their energies that make them move. And then some of the very famous deities that you may hear about in ancient Kemet, like Haru, who's a part of the Asarian Tel, or Tahuti, like the god of wisdom and God's will, it says that Haru came forth as Ptah, that Ptah shaped and formed Haru and Tahuti in his heart and brought them to being forth his tongue, and they came into being as him. They came forth as him. And so it goes on to say all of these things came forth into being as Ptah, that Ptah is putting a little bit of himself in everybody, and that It talks about the heart and the tongue control your limbs. So the heart and the tongue will control the limbs of the body. And that the heart of Ptah is in everything. The heart of Ptah is in everybody. It's in you, it's in me, it's in all things. And the tongue of Ptah is in everybody. So Ptah's will and its ability to speak is in everybody. Everybody's limbs, everybody's thoughts, and that even the creations that you make, the wonderful artwork that you do, or things you may do with your life, things you may do with your hands, that it's in your very limbs, and it's acting out its will, that your will or God's will is being acted out through you, through the limbs, or through that action and the things that you do. And it mentioned that Ptah, it created everything. And that's how he did it, by establishing things in his heart, shaping in his tongue, and putting a little bit of him into all beings, that you're really actually acting out the will of God as you go about your day-to-day life. And so this is a very magnificent and a marvelous theology, really, an idea of human beings, of everything coming from one source that has the ability to establish it in his heart and to bring it forth in his tongue. And that's the Shabaka Stone. That's what it was talking about. That's the communication of it. And I think it's something worthy, as we talk about literature and we talk about theology and we talk about our connection with God and what people thought in ancient days. This is definitely something I think that's worthy of us to think about and to talk about and to think about now and to kind of take into our hearts. So I just wanted to share that with you. And let me know if you have any questions. Please put it in the comments down below. I'll be taking a look at that. Thank you so much. Please share this with somebody. God bless you and thank you so much.